And get started. Good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar entitled Wills, Trusts, and Estates 101. My name is Carlin Calloway. I co-chair the Survivorship and Palliative Care Task Force with Krista Burke. We are grateful to Ella Meyer for her efforts to make this possible. She is the program manager for the Colorado Cancer Coalition. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Coalition's YouTube page. We are grateful to Maria Graver with Total Translations, who is making this presentation available in Spanish. It is my honor to introduce David Strousberg. He is providing this webinar in kind to us. David is a wills, trust, and estates attorney who founded the law firm Wills Simplified. This session will be repeated on May 8th at noon. You are encouraged to hear that session as well. David, the Zoom link is yours.
Excellent. Thank you, Carlin. And it's really nice to meet everybody. As you guys have heard, my name is Dave Strousberg, and I'm a wills, trust, and estates lawyer, which means that's typically what I work on. Okay. I started my career out as a corporate attorney and an employment attorney, and was doing some work for families and friends, about a decade ago that were asking for help with some wills, trusts, and estates. And I started it as a small side hustle, and it just grew and grew over the years that I eventually quit the corporate and employment law type job and started my own practice, which is Wills Simplified, where I've got a small team. There's 4 of us in total, and the goal is to make estate planning as accessible as possible for individuals, as simple as possible for individuals, and to provide education to clients wherever we, have the opportunity to be able to do so. As my practice has grown, I've had an opportunity to try to look into different types of areas where I'd love to be able to contribute and volunteer time. And as an individual, my mother passed away when I was young from cancer, and it's had, as I'm sure everybody can understand, long-term, impacts, both from certainly an estate planning standpoint, an emotional standpoint, but it's something that you kind of take with you and has really formed, a lot of my practice as well. And my goal here is to provide information, okay, is to be able to share with you some of the common questions that I hear from individuals when they come to me to ask about estate planning. And I have a presentation, but I like to try to keep it as informal as possible. And I certainly don't want to rush through it, but I want to give an opportunity for people to be able to ask questions as well, if you do have any questions. And if it's something that's relevant to a broader audience, I'm happy to be able to try and answer, the question here in real time. If not, once I finish the initial presentation, I will share my scheduling, link where anybody can, reach out to me, schedule time to be able to talk either via Zoom or a call. And for anybody that's part or associated with the Colorado Cancer Coalition, there's no charge to be able to do that. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Really, my hope is that this is the start of a long-term partnership and relationship, because it's so impressive the type of work that you all do, and it touches so many different lives from so many different angles as well. You can feel free to put a question in the chat, kind of as we're going as well. I'll do my best to be able to check it, but I'll certainly look at the conclusion of the presentation. But without further ado, I will look to share my screen and get started. My hope is that everybody can see this. You can see the presentation.
Looks great.
Great. Thanks, Ella. So I wouldn't be a lawyer if I didn't have a disclaimer first saying that every situation is different. Okay, this is not a situation here where we are engaged in a client relationship right now. If you do have any specific questions, you're going to want to reach out to me. And if I go through the presentation and you say, I've learned a lot, but I know another estate lawyer that I know or that I'd want to be able to reach out to, that's fine as well. The information that I'm sharing is pretty general information as well. So what I like to start with individuals and with families is I like to bring it to basics, and it's what is estate planning? Okay. And this idea that it's right away, it's unbelievably overwhelming for a lot of individuals. And part of that is because there's nothing inherently intuitive about estate planning to begin with. And at the same time, when you're going through the act of administering an estate plan, okay, it means one of two things typically. Somebody has lost capacity or somebody's passed away. So, in addition to trying to deal with something that is not inherently obvious, you also have the additional challenge of it being very, very emotional. So, that's why, of course, that's a plug for planning to begin with and why it's important. But the idea is I just try to boil it down to a few simple things that I have with this slide with my wife, Elisa, and our oldest daughter, Ellie. Got three kids. They're 10, 8, and 3. And really, the idea with estate planning is we want to try to be able to kind of figure out three things. Who do we want in charge in one of two situations that I was describing before? Who has authority? Who's making decisions for us in the event that we either lack capacity and we don't have the ability to do that anymore? Or who do we want in charge and to have authority in making decisions for us when we've passed away, when we're not here anymore? Oftentimes, we leave behind different types of assets or wishes or different types of things. We want to know who's going to be the one that's going to be in charge of going ahead to administer this. The next part of estate planning is really deciding, well, where do we
Excuse
want
me.
everything?
Are
Yeah.
you able to put it in present mode? We missed the picture of your family.
Oh, it's not on the slide?
We
They're
just
not
see,
advancing the slides. It's on the first one.
thank you.
It's not advancing. So I was going to say, give me 1 second, guys, and I'll see if I can.
What a fabulous family.
Are you able to see it like this? I can keep it like this if it's not, for some reason, the present mode is not.
That works well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, give me just 1 second. Okay, so I was going to say, so now you can see my wife and my daughter.
Thank you.
And the idea here too is that once we have an idea of who the authority is, who has authority for different types of things, we want to be able to focus on where is everything going to go? Is it going to go to our children? Is it going to go to our spouse, grandchildren? Who is it that is going to be receiving different types of things, from us? And then lastly, what we want to think about with estate planning is how is it actually going to be able to get there? Okay. What is the strategy that we're going to take? Because most people, okay, what they end up thinking about is this idea that, well, my estate's really simple. It's just my wife and I and our two children, and we want to leave everything to our two kids. And that is pretty simple. But what makes it more complicated is how you want it to be able to get there. Because you're thinking about an instance where you have assets, you have things that you have for your family, and you want to transfer it. Well, how you transfer it is what makes all of the difference. Okay.
Excuse me, if you click on the slideshow button in the upper right,
Yep.
Ian is giving us tech support. Thank you.
Are you able to see it now moving?
It's still not in
Um,
slideshow, so it's going to get stuck
Yeah.
unless you click on everyone.
Yeah. So I was going to say, give me just 1 second, guys. Are you seeing it move now?
No,
Okay, so I'm going to go back to how it was before then, if that's okay.
perfect. We see avoiding probate.
Yeah, perfect. So if we go back to the idea that we want to try to figure out from an estate planning standpoint, okay, how are we going to be transferring actual assets or possessions or things that we own? A lot of estate planning has to do with this idea of how are we going to avoid probate? How are we going to make sure that assets are able to pass, or the things that we own or our bank accounts or our retirement accounts or anything that we have is able to pass as best we can? Because what typically happens is if you don't have a plan in place, most things are going to go through probate. And what's probate? Well, probate's the court supervised process where your assets are going to get distributed. Okay. Probate's public. It can be costly. It can take a long time. And creditors get involved first. Now, there's a lot of lawyers out there that like to try to scare people away from the idea of probate. They want to make sure They tell everybody to do everything they possibly can to make sure that they're avoiding probate at all costs. It doesn't have to be that way, okay, at all. I try not to scare people from probate, and maybe there's always people on these calls that somebody has gone through it before. It's this idea, I would compare it to almost like having to schedule, 12 to 18 appointments with the DMV that you have to go to, and that you have to, you show up and you have to sit there all day, not knowing when it is that you're going to be called. And the reason that probate exists is to make sure that all the assets are frozen and held together. And the court wants to make sure that any creditors are going to be paid back first. They want to make sure that anything that you owe at the time that you've passed away is going to be paid and given to the individuals that or companies that need to be able to receive their assets. Probate can be expensive, okay? It can be expensive, and the average cost of probate is in this country is about 3% of your total assets. So if you pass away with a $500,000 home, it could cost about $15,000 to get through the probate process. Not to mention there's a lot of time that's involved in probate as well, because the courts want to make sure that your assets have time to be able to get passed. Okay, and more specifically, they want to make sure that the creditors have an opportunity to make their claims, to say what it is that they feel is owed. Okay, so I always give an example with this. Let's talk about a house, for example. So let's say that you pass away and you don't have an estate plan in place. The first example I have is I didn't do anything. Well, your house is going to automatically go into the probate process, and there's no will, and I'll talk about what that does in a bit, but the house is going to get frozen, and the court is going to want to determine who rightfully has that authority. Remember, I said that estate planning is all about decision makers and authority. And then the court's going to want to know, where's the asset going to be able to go? So who's the beneficiary? And then when you don't have a plan in place at all, the court will do things like have hearings, okay, send notices to potential beneficiaries where people can come forth and say that they're entitled to something, and it's a slower process. Another way that you can talk about owning a house is if you own it as a joint tenant, and that's typically what married couples do. Although a lot of couples come to me, they think they own something as a joint tenancy, but they don't. That means that you own it with your spouse. And if one spouse passes away, the house is automatically able to transfer to the other spouse. So what is a will then? And I'll get more into detail with this. Well, a will is a set of instructions for that probate court. So it ends up making the probate process go a bit faster than it would if there was nothing in place at all. So a will is something that you do that provides a set of instructions, and I'll give you another example kind of this as a second. And then I also talk about with a lot of my clients and people that I work with that Colorado allows you to create something called a beneficiary deed. And that's sort of like with your retirement accounts or your bank accounts. If you've ever seen, they have, or life insurance, they have beneficiary designations. You can do that with your house as well. So a lot of individual families all work on creating a will for them, which is a set of instructions for probate, and then a way to make their house pass faster should something happen to them. And then finally, you have a trust, which kind of bypasses all of this. So I want to talk about really the two primary strategies that go from estate planning. And I think that the best way to conceptualize this before I go into the details here is to think about, we all live in Colorado. So I like to use the example of hiking a mountain or hiking a 14er. If you were to pass away, okay, and you want your family to be able to inherit your assets, the things that you own, and you don't have any type of will or plan in place at all, it's like saying to your family, okay, you can have all of these things. You're entitled to all of them, okay, like you to be able to have them, but you have to go through probate first. And what that means when you're comparing to kind of that mountain, it's saying, all right, we have no plan in place, so I can't tell you which mountain. I can't tell you what equipment you'll need. I can't tell you the best time to do it, okay, or what type of strategy you should take to be able to hike that mountain, okay? Maybe it's a mountain that's really close. Maybe you're an avid, the person you're leaving it to is an avid hiker and they can figure it out. But for the most part, passing away without any type of plan is like saying when you get to the top of the mountain, there's going to be things that we're leaving you, but you have to get up there first with little instructions. If you pass away with a will is a set of instructions for the probate court. So in an example, like with the hiking of the mountain, it's almost like saying to your family, okay, there's all of our different types of assets and things that we're leaving for you. You're going to have to hike a mountain. And because a will is a set of instructions, it's almost like saying, I want you to hike this mountain. This is the equipment that you would need to be able to do it. This is the best time to be able to do it. And here's the best trail to be able to take. It allows them to hike that mountain, okay, or to get up that hill or whatever it is in this example, in a way that they have a map, they have some guidance. That's what a will is, okay? People reach out to me all the time and they say, I need to set up a will so that my family can bypass the probate process. Number one misconception, that is not a thing at all. A will is for probate. That's what it's intended for. You can't set one up and then have it bypass it because it's part of it. And then you have a trust, which I'll explain in a second, sort of what that is. But if we're talking about a strategy for estate planning, it's to have a will that can make the probate process as easy as possible. And just know that wills are guaranteed probate. They're really for death only. They're public. That's how we always end up knowing about celebrities' messes that they have after they pass away, because probate documents are public. Anybody can access them. With a will, there's no, asset protection. There's nothing that you can do to save an inheritance that you're leaving one of your kids or something like that for, against divorce or lawsuits, things like that. A will is only for if you pass away, so you're not planning for incapacitation or anything like that. And typically, like I said, there's a process to probate that takes about 6 months, okay, at a minimum to about 2 years, where your assets are frozen and you're having your family, the people that are involved in your will, handling how everything is going to be administered. A trust, on the other hand, which I'll go into some more detail as well, a trust it's like a container, and you'll see on another slide, I compare it almost to like a glass of ice water, okay? Where the trust is the glass and the ice is the different assets that you have. That container, it allows you to have your assets, okay, bypass probate completely. That container or that glass allows you to have people manage your assets on your behalf if you were to become incapacitated. They're private, okay? You can do things where you can leave assets to children in a way that protects them from divorce. And it bypasses probate. So what does that mean? Assets and everything like that can transfer right away. There's no delay. So again, from a trust perspective, if we're going to conceptualize it, it's like a glass, okay? It's this glass of ice water. And when I meet with families, I use this example because one of the first questions that I'll either offer them if they're in my office is, can I get you a glass of water, coffee, something like that? Or I'll do a lot of home visits for clients as well. And what do they do when I sit down? They'll offer me a glass of ice water as well. So conceptually, I started to see it this way. So think of a trust as that glass. Okay. And then the ice cubes themselves are the assets that you have, your home, your bank accounts, investments, all of those different types of things. And the water is the different rules or things that you want to set up for that glass. So when you set up a trust, you're really having three parties that you'll see in another slide. You have a grantor, someone that sets it up. You have a trustee, that's someone that manages it. And you have a beneficiary, that's somebody that benefits from it, okay? When a trustee is the person that manages the glass, well, if you become incapacitated, you can pass it on to the next trustee, the next person to manage it immediately. And you do that if you're incapacitated or if you pass away. Okay. So like I said, when you put your trust together, you have the different parties. You have a grantor, that's the person that set it up. You have the trustee, that's the one that manages it and then follows the instructions that you're putting as part of the estate planning. And then you have the beneficiary. Okay. So the individual or individuals that are benefiting from what it is that you've put together. Now, what do you put into a trust? You put things like real property, financial accounts, like your bank accounts. You connect retirement accounts in an interesting way, okay? Not necessarily like the other ways because those have a bit of a different flavor. You connect your life insurance, your businesses, LLCs that you own. I have a lot of clients that have their own small businesses. Those go into that trust. And when you customize it, you're able to do things for your kids because minor children can't inherit something right away. So you're able to say, well, I'd like this managed for them until a particular, period of time. You're able to maybe save some money on taxes. You're able to, like I said, protect from future divorces or creditors or lawsuits for your kids or whoever you're leaving it to. And you're able to work with different types of standards in case families have family members that have special needs, or if you want to leave an inheritance to a kid and it's kind of split over time. Okay. There's additional estate planning tools that go along with those, and you're probably familiar with some of these, like a general power of attorney, a medical power of attorney. That's when you're naming people to make decisions on your behalf when you're incapacitated. A lot of people come to me and they say, well, my mom passed away. She didn't have a will, but she filled out a form and named me as her financial power of attorney. So I should be able to handle all this and bypass probate. That's not the case. When somebody passes away, that power of attorney is no longer relevant because it's for when somebody's incapacitated. Okay. You can have a living will, which I work with a lot of families in health related situations where you're talking about end of life decisions and how long you want to receive artificial nutrition or life support. HIPAA disclosures, I mentioned those beneficiary deeds and transfer on death designations as well. The last thing that I'll say before I move away from the formality, kind of the presentation is people are always like, how can I get started on doing something like this? It's so overwhelming to think of what to do. Well, first and foremost, start to have conversations. Conversations build up momentum. Talk to your family and friends about what you want to do. And a lot of people say to me, well, I don't want to talk about it because it's so morbid and I don't want to think about it. And there's no correlation causation. Planning doesn't cause something bad to happen. Planning helps you in case something does happen. Okay. So it's great to be able to talk to your family. I always recommend to people that maybe if they're not ready to start estate planning, that they create these 3 different lists. All right. They think about um, who they want to give authority to. So maybe it's their spouse or an adult child or a relative or family member, in the event that they're not here. You want to consider what your approach is. Again, I would certainly love to work with the people that are on here, but the purpose of this presentation is to give you information. So there's lots of DIY options out there. I wouldn't recommend that you do them because you're not certain about them, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. So you have to consider kind of what your approach is. Do you want to try to be able to do this yourself, or do you want to hire an attorney to be able to do that? And then most attorneys will offer a relatively low cost or in certain instances, free, which is, like I said, for anybody part of the coalition here, consultation where you can kind of talk about what it is that you need to be able to do, okay, to be able to get started. I want to say this, guys. This is my first time doing this presentation, obviously, with all of you. And doing these on Zoom is always tricky, right? Because it's pretty dry material. It's not anything that's overly exciting to be able to talk about, but it's important at the same time. But what I want to be able to kind of say before I open it up for any questions or thoughts about how things go is that I want you to really think about this idea that estate planning is focusing on those 3 things. What is it that I want to be able to do to name people to represent me in the event that I can't represent myself? The other part of that is, where do I want the things that I have to go? Who do I want to be able to have them? Because what you're able to leave behind to your family members are often a lifeline, right? It's things that are able to put kids through school. It's things that if you're not here and you're a provider for individuals, it helps people be able to continue to pay a mortgage or inherit your house in a way that's relatively easy. It's a way to be able to feel comfortable to know that if there was a health scenario or situation going on where you couldn't make decisions for yourself, that you've named people to be able to have that authority for you. So you have those decision makers And then you also have where you want things to be able to go. And then it's really about strategically thinking, how am I going to make this as easy as possible for my family given my situation? And that's really what I do is I take a look at it and I say, well, in your situation, I'd recommend a will with maybe adding these types of documents onto that as well. Or maybe I'd say, you know what, given what you have, I would recommend a trust. Okay, that might be a good idea. And here are the different types of reasons that go along with that and why. You always have to remember that people spend a lot of time and energy trying to set these types of things up, but these documents really only go into effect again in one of two situations: when you're incapacitated or if you've passed away. So you want to make sure that you've done something in a way where it is accurately reflects what you want to be able to have done. Okay, that you have something in a way that makes things as simple as possible. And again, I said that the estate planning is all about that strategy component, that piece to it. So I can give you an example of two different clients with the same problem, okay, the same issue, that are trying to figure out a way to resolve something. Both clients are adult children, okay, both females, both women. They're not related to each other, but their parents had passed away. Okay, they had been sick, and their parents had passed away, and they were leaving them their house. Well, in one instance, with the first client, the parents left the daughter, their adult daughter, their home. Okay, and they left it to her by way of a will. Now she's hired me, and I'm working with her to go through the probate process, and she's going to be up that mountain. Remember, I said you go up a mountain, to be able to gain access. We're finally at the point of where she's going to be able to gain full access to for ownership and all the, close out the probate. And it took about 8 months to be able to do that. Another client, a woman inherited a house from her parents. Her parents had a trust. She came to see me, presented the trust. I prepared the paperwork for her. She was able to get possession of the and ownership of the home that day. Okay, the same exact day. So it really kind of shows that strategy is really important for what it is that you're trying to do. And like I said earlier, people will say to me all the time, hey, I want to set up a will so that I can bypass probate. That's not a thing. Okay. That is not a thing. I don't know how more articulate I could perhaps be about that, because they go hand in hand, together. Um, but trying to think strategically about what you're doing is what's important, as opposed to this idea where people say it's real simple. It's just my wife and I, and we have one child, and we want to leave them our home and our retirement account. That does seem simple enough. How you transfer it is what makes the big difference. And then remember, against all of this, okay, against all these things happening and going on, you often have a significant amount of emotion that's occurring, because you're dealing with what we're all dealing with, right? We're dealing with the tragedy, that happens with different family members at different points of our lives. And it's the backdrop or the undercurrent of what is trying to occur with a lot of these different types of things as well. So my role, what I try to be able to do is, like I said, make it as easy as possible for families, as much as I possibly can, to try to educate, provide information, prepare the plan, discuss strategy, and then I'll also talk with the surviving family members after as well, as to be able to see if I can answer questions, point in the right direction, all of that type of stuff as well. Look, to break the fourth wall, third wall, fourth wall, I'm not sure what the proper terminology is for this. I really want to try to keep this more informal than formal from the same standpoint. And like I said, I know it's information that's pretty dry. And my goal is to be helpful and to be a resource for all of you, not just in this conversation here, but to work with the Colorado Cancer Coalition going forward in ways to be supportive to all of you, in ways that that I'm not sure what they would be, but in ways to be able to help you either with questions or planning for your families or referrals to other individuals, anything like that. So the first thing that I'll ask that I'm going to ask all of you a question, and I would love any type of response or anything like that at all. Is this helpful? Is this something that you feel like you all want to be able to have? Is this information that you find to be able to be useful, for all of you that are participating in this call? I see some heads nodding and I see some thumbs up, so I'll take that as yes. And then I'll look over to the chat as well, but feel free. Now I'm able to see everybody telling me that the slideshow. Yeah, I know it's click slideshow on the top right. I do these all the time. For some, Google made some sort of weird update and it wasn't doing it. So I was gonna say that is all right. Emily had said, when is the recommended time frame to put an estate plan in place? Can you do this on your own without an attorney? Okay, so you might have heard that I said that you can do DIY approaches, Emily. There's nothing wrong with them, although they're littered with unintended consequences. Okay, so it's one of those types of things where you think that things are happening the way that you want to. For instance, there's ways to make probate shorter by waiving the right to or the need for a family to post bond. There's ways to make it shorter by waiving the right for hearings. There's things that you can do if you can get assets below a certain threshold about how they're presented to the probate court to make probate easy, faster or longer. So can you do it on your own? There's nobody stopping you, from being able to do that. And I'm not the type of lawyer that is like, no, absolutely not. You can, and it very well might work for your family. As somebody that practices in this and that sees all of the issues that come along with it as well over and over again, and maybe it's not that people don't reach out to me that do DIY planning to call me to just randomly to say, I don't know you, but I just wanted to let you know that I did this myself and it worked great for my family. What I hear instead is, my mom or dad did this themselves and it's a mess, and how can you help me be able to fix this? And I spend a lot of time fixing or addressing unintended consequences. As far as when's the recommended time frame, did you mean how long does it take or when should you do it?
When should you do it?
First and foremost, you should do it while you are alive and have capacity. Okay, so I was going to say those are important because people often talk to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I should have done that." They're apologizing to me because they should have done this earlier. They feel like they should have. And my response is, "Well, you're alive and you have capacity, so you're certainly not too late. Okay, you have the ability to do this now." My recommendation is the time frame is you should do it when you care about what happens in who's representing you in the event you can't represent yourself, or if you have any type of assets or belongings that you want to make sure go to where they're supposed to be next. So people come to me to estate plan at three primary times of their lives. Okay. I have a lot of clients that are young families. Okay. Married couple, one child, maybe a baby on the way. They just bought a house. They're just starting and they've gotten good advice from their parents or from other individuals, and they'll come to me to set up a will or a trust or something like that for them. Estate planning addresses guardianship for minor children as well, so they'll want to get that done. Another time that they'll come, so that's the first time. The next time that people come to me is when it's parents that have adult children or children that are going to be adults in the next several years. Okay. So maybe they're high school aged and they're starting to think about, okay, my role as a parent is changing. Okay. My kids are getting older. And I want to make sure that I'm doing everything that I can to perhaps protect them. And I have a lot of clients that don't have kids either. So it could be nieces or nephews or family members or siblings or whoever that is. So they're trying to think kind of, prospectively about the future. And they're also realizing that they've accumulated a bunch by way of their home and their retirement and all of those things. So they're thinking about their adult kids. And then the final time that people typically come to me to estate plan is all hands on deck. Okay, we need to be able to get this done now. And I'll spend a lot of time with families and with individuals in hospice. Okay, so that can coincide with people that are older, but obviously, as we all know, it could be at any point at any time's life. So those are kind of those three different types of areas. Does that answer your question a bit? Okay. Um, so other question was, do I have resources to be able to work with or recommendations, those types of things? Absolutely. Okay. So one of the things that I will say is that cost is when you say that families don't have the ability to work with a lawyer, depending on what the context is of the estate, it could say spending some money up front can save a considerable amount of money on the end after somebody were to pass away. Okay, so it's about putting things in perspective. There's lots of resources that are available that perhaps I can share with Ella and Carlin, as well, that you guys can share with your organization about different types of things that people have the ability to take a look at that can help with families in these types of situations. And I'm also, again, introducing myself as a resource that if you do have families that can't necessarily afford an attorney, it doesn't cost any money for them to talk to me. That, like, really, I'm trying to emphasize the idea that I'm here to be able to help as much as I possibly can. And if they can't afford to retain me, hopefully I can point them in the right direction. Again, I'm not the type of lawyer that tries to scare people away from DIY or those types of things, but I would tell them the risks of something like that, but at least try to point them in the right direction to be able to say, you're going to want to do this, you shouldn't do this. Here's what you might want to consider, those types of things. I don't currently have any resources in other languages or for the deaf community. I'm not opposed to, and as I grow as a practice, that might be something that I certainly look into. And great question, Mark. Is there a net worth where estate planning should be undertaken? Great question. Very common because people will say, I mean, literally the calls that I get every day will involve people saying, I need something really simple. I don't have much. I just have this or this. I don't need estate planning. Estate planning is not about how much you have. It's about what you have and the ways that you want it to transfer. Okay. And again, that other component too of who do you want making decisions for you in the event that you can't? You don't need to have any net worth to name people that are making decisions for you. Okay. That's one. Two, you have more than you think that you have. And it's not necessary. I'm not saying that you have, a pile of money in your closet or something like that. I'm saying that when you're talking about estate planning and your assets, the government is totaling everything up after you pass. So for instance, you may have life insurance. You're never going to see a dime of that if you have like term life insurance because it's going to your beneficiaries, but that counts towards your net worth. So even though you won't have it, there's people that have $100,000 policy. All of a sudden they have $100,000 net worth. They're like, I don't feel that way. I'm not enjoying the six figures that's there. But for the sake of the government, it's considered part of your net worth of what it is that you have. So my basic recommendation to individuals is it's not necessarily how much do you have, it's how easy do you want to make things for the people in your family and your loved ones in the event that you're not here. Okay. Because it doesn't take a lot for your assets to have to go through probate. And if you own a home in the state of Colorado, your family's going to probate. Okay. Like that's how, unless you utilize a strategy like I had talked about earlier, and that's what people do. But every state is different and homes are guaranteed, to go through probate unless you have one of those exceptions set up. And that's why you would, utilize estate planning. Do I have any ideas for identifying an attorney for this? Your mom's in Minnesota is interested in setting up. Well, one, you can reach out to me because I know attorneys in every state. Okay. So I'm happy to be able to put you in touch with somebody to be able to speak with there. Another good place to always go is two options. One, check out the State Bar Association of of Minnesota or whatever state that is as well, because oftentimes the state bar may have recommendations. And I would ask for referrals. Okay. Have your mom ask people that she knows through organizations, through her church, through other places as well, and talk to an attorney. Okay. I would talk to them before you commit to going forth to be able to do something. The biggest compliment that I get often is that I don't seem like a lawyer, to individuals, because a lot of estate planning consists of somebody meeting and saying, fill out this form, I'll prepare these documents, sign here. That's just not my style. That's just not how I do it. Like I said, there's emotion all around like the entire time, and there's nothing intuitive. So it's really important to explain it, and it's important to be sensitive and compassionate to your clients as well, because if they're coming to talk to you about estate planning, and depending on how much they need it and how quickly, it's not because they're having an amazing day. And they're thinking that this is like, if I could spend my entire day doing anything in the world, I'd prepare a will. That's not how it works. Okay. So make sure you're talking, to individuals um, there. Thank you for the yes, Courtney. Ian, I appreciate that as well. How would we make providing philanthropy to cancer organizations and their wills? I get this question all the time. So there's lots, and I was going to say it's one of the things that I'm going to want to talk about with Ella and Carlin as well, is I work with a lot of families. Having being part of a family where I've lost, as I mentioned, my mother to cancer. I'll talk about that with my clients a lot, and lots of clients are leaving donations, trying to set up gifting trusts, leaving as a portion of their estate to different types of organizations or cancer related ones. And one, I'm always looking for new recommendations or suggestions. That's what I was going to say. I would talk to the coalition, about in particular for how I can direct my clients, at the same time. But that's a great question that you asked during a consultation. Do you have experience? Okay, with helping families to be able to make a contribution or a donation. Now, a lot of times what that involves for me is connecting my clients with the individuals. I'm not an expert necessarily, and I don't pretend to be at all, but I certainly am a resource, and that's part of the service that I try to provide as well. So, could I explain what happens if there's no will? I was going to say that, oh, sorry, guys, I'm getting lost in these questions. How long does it typically take to complete a trust? With my clients, it takes about 30 days from start to finish. Okay. It can take a little bit longer. It can be shorter if need be, but I try to do things in about a short amount of time. Carlin, you'd asked the question if I could explain the probate process, what happens if there's no will. That's like having to hike that mountain with no instructions. So if there's nothing at all the assets become frozen. Okay. You can't access them. You'll try to go to the bank. You won't be able to do that. What you're ultimately looking for from the court is what's known as letters testamentary. You've heard of a last will and testament. Letters testamentary are the giving you the authority. So the court will put you through the ringer in order to be able to get that authority. Now, they may give you the authority. If you have a will, they'll give it to you early on so that you have the ability to distribute the assets, but there's still a time period, a statutory time period on it before those transfers can be considered complete. So if you don't have everything gets frozen. Okay. And you have to reach out to the court in the county, where the individual had lived, and you have to initiate and file probate in order to be able to open. And probate, again, is that court supervised process. So it's hearings, it's notices to beneficiaries, it's all. I like to say this to clients. Probate is not impossible. And again, lots of lawyers would scare people into saying, don't do probate ever. It's terrible. And it's not fun. I compared it to like a dozen appointments at the DMV. Probate is not impossible, but it is avoidable. Okay. I know that when I'm on a consultation with a family and it starts out by them saying, my parents passed away and they had a trust or they didn't have a trust. Okay. Whatever. And if they didn't have one, they can say, we just went through probate and it was a nightmare. We're still going through it. Or they'll say, my parents had a trust and holy cow, that was easy. I know that we're on the same page and it's going to go very smoothly, is trying to be able to set something up for them because they can conceptualize that as well. Laura, you're asking, is it better to set up a revocable trust or an irrevocable trust? That's a great question. Trusts have kind of two flavors. So trusts it's a container, right? That glass of ice water that you have. a revocable trust is like 95% of trusts that are set up that people do. Revocable means that you can control it. You're in control of everything. You can change it. You can add things to it. You can do whatever you want with it. An irrevocable trust is one that can't be changed once you set it up. And by the way, this is an oversimplification, but I'm just trying to give an answer here. And why would somebody set up an irrevocable trust? In one of two situations, typically. One, they're concerned about being sued. Okay. They're in a position where they have malpractice insurance for whatever type of job that they have is, but they want to have additional protection. If you put something in an irrevocable trust, you're giving away uh, your assets, to that trust, and in exchange for giving up that control, you're gaining some protection. So I could do a 10-part webinar series on just the differences between revocable and irrevocable. Laura, if that's a question that you really want to talk about further, you can reach out to me. Let me say this too. I'll add in now. There's my scheduling link if people want to, schedule some time or a consultation like that with me. Like I said, no cost for anybody that's part of this. And if you do it now, terrific. If it's something that you have, and want to do in the future, I'll put my email address, here as well, so that you have an opportunity to reach out to me. But I think I've covered the questions that I see in the chat here. And I see, Carlin, you say that you've got some great organizations. That's good. Other than the fact that this is a dry topic, certainly, and that I look completely inept, that I couldn't figure out the presentation mode, even though I promise you I know how to do it, I just couldn't hear. I was going to say, so Emily, I just put my email address. You've got my scheduling link there as well. I was going to say in my contact information, if you want to see too, here's my website. But I was going to say that my goal is to spend the next couple of minutes to see if anybody has any additional questions, anything that I can. What do you say to caregivers and people impacted by cancer? Add them to bank accounts? I'd never say to add people to bank accounts. Okay, people do that, but that's an example of unintended consequences. So if you add family members to a bank account, you certainly make it easy for that individual, okay, for the family members. But there's ways to be able to do it to still protect the individuals that have cancer to begin with. So there's things that can be done. What happens when you add people to bank accounts is that money is theirs. So the individuals that you're adding, it could be, again, I'm talking unintended consequences. You add a caregiver, you add a child, you add other individuals to your bank account, and then they get divorced. Okay. That individual, well, their name's on that bank account. That money is subject to that divorce. Okay. And then all of a sudden you could end up leaving different types of things. So you want to make sure that you're talk to an estate planning attorney to say, are there other ways to be able to do this? Because it is, people will add their kids and they love their kids and their kids help them, but their kids need money for something. And then all of a sudden there's no money. They're like, I'll pay you back. But they don't have to pay them back. It's theirs. And two, it's full of unintended consequences. That's really what the idea is here. Is it okay to leave my mom's name on a trust she did not set up in New Jersey? I'm not sure I understand what that question is. I was going to say, Ada, can you elaborate a little bit? I was going to say, and you don't have to use the chat. You can also unmute yourself and ask too. I was going to say, I'm just not sure I understand the question there. Let me say this in the meantime as well. Feel free to either put in the chat or share with me now. What other types of information? I'm doing this presentation again in about 2 months in May, okay? And in addition to being able to present it the correct way, okay, I want to make sure that I'm providing information that is useful and helpful. What other types of things in particular in the hour that's scheduled for the individuals on this call, if you're either going to attend another one, in a couple of months, or if you were to recommend it, what do you think would be helpful to be able to hear about, or what did you find particularly helpful that you'd like to learn more? Would you be able to do the consultation with two parties? Of course, yeah. I was going to say that Kelly, yes. I I'm not sure if you mean two individuals, like a married couple, or like a mother and child, or father and child, something like that, or if it's just two separate families. Yeah, yourself and absolutely. So I was going to say that I'm more than willing to and happy to be able to do that too. That's great to be able
David,
to.
Ada is having a tough time unmuting.
Okay,
So, I wish I could unmute her, but I can't. So between Emily and Ella and myself, we will do our best to pass on Ada's question.
great,
She said she'll send a follow-up email too.
Cool. I
great.
think, David, to your question, definitely, for some, the cancer journey can be quite long. And so in the future, what is reasonable to tell the caregiver who's sitting at all the doctor's appointments, the hospital rooms? And then, what about our Spanish speaking population, or we're thinking about people in rural Colorado, like outside the norm of the typical person who may or may not find you on a website. So rural Colorado, Spanish speaking, I'm
Uh,
trying to think of
Great. I was going to say
diverse group.
great things to be able to do. And I'll say this as well. One, I serve the entire state and I have a very heavy client base in rural Colorado as well, that people have never seen my website, okay, at all. Um, I would say that 90% of my business is referral and word of mouth. So, but if there are resources that I could work with the coalition to be able to put together to attract, or, let them know that I'm a resource. I'd love to work with everybody. This is my business, but at the same exact time, that's not the major focus of what I'm trying to be able to do here. It's to be able to provide help and access, and again, really make estate planning accessible. And as I was saying earlier too, I don't have any other language, sort of set up, to be able to provide access to. But perhaps I could look for a firm such as myself that may have that to be able to add as a reference as well. Because if somebody's not working with me, I still want them to work with somebody. I'd love for them to be able to do that, to be able to help. And you brought up a great point, Carlin, what to say to people that are going to all the doctor's appointments. One thing I can tell you is that from an efficiency standpoint, a lot of the stuff that you're filling out at doctor's appointments are involved in estate planning documents. So it becomes easier to go through and create an estate plan. Remember, estate planning is not just for death, it's also for incapacitation. So if you go through with an estate planning attorney, typically people will set something up with me. Okay. And then they'll utilize those documents and get them on file with all the offices so that they have those already. And from an efficiency standpoint, you don't have to sit there in the waiting room or even in the doctor's office, once you're there filling out more forms again, because it's a lot of the similar type of information that's needed. And for somebody who creates forms for a living, such as myself, there's nothing that I hate more than needing healthcare and having to sit down and fill out a bunch of paperwork. It drives me crazy. Okay. Whereas I should understand why I'm doing it, but I'm a human being. I feel the same exact, I feel the same exact way about that as well. Also, I would say to you that yes, cancer can be a long journey for a lot of people. Remember, none of what I'm talking about is intuitive. That's part of what the challenge is. And as the journey becomes more emotional often as you go. Now, I work with a lot of clients that it's very emotional initially, when somebody will receive a diagnosis, and then there's kind of putting a plan together in place, and then the emotion can kind of continue to ride through, a wave, as you go at the same exact time. But my advice is similar to what you would expect, as it is something intuitive in this instance. I would try to get your planning done sooner rather than later. I would start with it because peace of mind is a term that is often overused. I mean, certainly with car insurance commercials, but I was going to say, but just as far as when people try to sell different types of services as well, I often have to remind people after they have their initial meeting of estate planning with me that their documents aren't signed and in effect yet, because after we conclude the meeting, they feel such a relief, such stress having gone away. They feel so much better that they've gotten it from their mouth out into, working with a professional to be able to get it done. So I was going to say there is a lot of value in being able to start early. And if you choose the right attorney, whether it's me or somebody else in your own communities, hopefully you're able to pick one that is not somebody that just puts documents together, but that can continue to be a resource and an advocate for you on these things as you go. That's who I am. That's kind of how I try to be able to have my experience. Katie, you had said, am I able to do a trust via phone, email? Is it require an in-person appointment? So I offer all. So I was going to say I give clients 3 options of how they can meet with me. All right. They can meet with me at my office. So I have an office in Centennial, Colorado. There's a Top Golf off of I-25 and Arapahoe, and I'm right across the street from there. I'll do home visits for up to about 90 minutes outside of the Denver metropolitan area. I'll even come to you. It's easier for some people. Scheduling that can, requires some planning because it'll take, sometimes my whole day, to be able to do that. And then I offer for clients as well. We can do this over the phone. We can do this over Zoom. We can do this however it is that you want to. I just need to make sure that the person that I'm talking to is the client, right? Because a lot of people will call me up and say, my mom needs to do this and she wants to leave me everything. I'm like, great. Well, I'd love to talk to your mom. Oh, she told me I can do all of this. So, well, until you actually have the document authorizing somebody to do that for you, I can't do that for you. And I'm the one that creates the document for you. So I know you don't, I know you don't have it. So very long answer, Katie, but yes, I'm able to do these virtually or over the phone or however it is that you want to be able to do this. 2 minutes left. Any other questions that anybody has at all? And again, I'm hoping that you found this helpful, that this has been useful for you. And I also hope that some of you schedule some time with me. I'd love to learn about yourselves and your families or your businesses, kind of that you're running or operating. And if you have, like I said, there's no charge to talk to me. So if you have any questions or anything like that, I'm happy to be able to speak with you as well. I think that's my time, and I think I'm good. I'll hand it back over to the coalition members to add anything else at all. So thank you guys